guys. Welcome back to the Left of Str8 Show Interviews, the premier podcast that shares the stories of our amazing LGBTQ community and, of course, fantastic straight allies, all from entertainment, foodies, books, music, and advocacy. I'm your host, as always, Scott Fullerton, and let's start talking. Well, everyone, today I am thrilled to have with us a creative force in independent cinema, writing, and podcasting. Steve Balderson's in studio with me, known for his distinctive style, fearless storytelling, and he's carved out a unique place in the world of film. As a writer, director, and producer, his work has spanned a range of genres, always pushing boundaries and inviting audiences into captivating, often unconventional worlds. His latest project, Love Venezia, promises to be no exception. Set against the enchanting backdrop of Venice, Italy, this film explores love, longing, and the human condition in the way only Steve can. He's also launched his new book back in July, Accessing Creativity. Can't wait to talk to him about all of this, his creative process, and more. But first, take a look. There we go.
I am giving you a trip to Venice.
Jesus, Mom. It feels like most gay guys just want to be intimate without any actual intimacy.
There's gotta be guys out there that are looking for something meaningful, just like you are.
I've been having a lot of sex with strangers.
It is time for you to move on and start enjoying life and find yourself again.
Venezia, my dear friend, is a living, breathing work of art.
Guys, I'd like you to meet Marco.
We barely know the guy.
He was nothing but kind all day.
There's something off about him.
I want to kiss you so badly.
Let's enjoy the magic waiting.
Is Marco a good kisser?
Actually, we haven't even made out yet.
My pace might not be what you're used to.
I have to remind you that I don't live here. And I am going back to the US next week.
A city of temptation. In every corner you will find mystery and seduction.
Last night woke me up. My senses, flooded back inside me with this spectacular roar.
Love and sensuality are not only about physical pleasure. It is about understanding the very essence of the other person.
Prepare to embark on a journey of transformation that will forever change the course of your life. Are you ready, Eddie? Yes. By the magic and the passion that is Venezia.
All right, we are back. That was the trailer of the new film, Love Venezia, from my new guest today, Mr. Steve Balderson in studio. Steve, how are you, sir?
I am great. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being on the show. I appreciate you sending me a special screener link last week. I absolutely love the movie. It's been playing film circuits for a while now, all the different award shows, everything, doing a great job. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's an accomplishment.
Well, I'm excited to get into all of that and your book, but I always like to start out with first-time guests on the show. You're openly and proud LGBTQ community. Talk to me a little bit about where you grew up and what kind of a kid were you?
I grew up in a little town called Wamego, Kansas, which was basically a suburb of a college town where there was a university. It was in the northeastern part of Kansas, so it was close enough to Lawrence and Kansas City that it wasn't totally rural, but it was rural. Because there was a college university nearby, I think it was a little bit better of a growing up experience than people in maybe western Kansas or like southern, southeast or southwest Kansas. But it was certainly growing up in, agriculture land and being a queer person. I mean, I don't even know if I really knew I was. I was never in the closet, but I was just me always. And luckily I had a really good family that it just let you be yourself. So, those things were helpful. But I think I lived in a bit of my own bubble. So in my own mind, my own mindset. So I didn't realize how stifling it was until later on. When I grew up, I was like, oh, I got to get out of here.
Gotcha. And where do you think you first started finding your LGBTQ tribe? Was it in college when you were getting into the entertainment business, or where did you start finding that tribe?
I didn't really find, now I know who else was when we were growing up, but at the time I didn't. So I just had some good friends. And then I think I discovered that when I was at CalArts, when I was in film school. And I mean, I had traveled a lot of places. So I had seen different walks of life, all over the place. But it never occurred to me that none of that existed in Kansas.
Right. Oh my goodness. Yeah. It always seems to be when you start getting into school and college where you start finding those tribes. Some people it takes a little bit longer before they're in the closet for a lot longer. So it's kind of nice when you're able to kind of make those connections earlier on like that. I do want to start with the book though, Accessing Creativity. You were able to send me a link to that as well as the movie. Absolutely loved it. Talk about creating this book and what the inspiration came from and how did this come to you?
Well, I started working on it about a year before we did the movie. And part of it was after a series of, throughout the pandemic, I was obsessed with listening to Alan Watts, and I read all of Eckhart Tolle's books. And, I sort of had this sort of aha moment for myself about how to approach things. And the first movie that I made with that mindset was Alchemy of the Spirit with Xander Berkeley and Sarah Clark. And throughout creating that, some things just clicked. And I knew I wanted to share this mindset with other people because I think it's what's helped me. And when people ask me, Kathleen Wilhoit is a good friend of mine. And at one point she said, how do you do it? I just keep making things, all the time. And yes, I'm a serial entrepreneur, but I think it's also in just having this mindset of if you remove judgment, whether that's self-judgment, judgment to others, or being judged, then you're left with the product as it is. And that could be a poem, a painting, a piece of music, a film, a book, whatever. And so I just kind of blah, like on the page, or I just get it all out. And then once it's out, I can begin to piece it together. And that's when it's really important to just listen to no one, nothing, just your internal spirit, your internal gut, if you will, to identify what it is that you are about to make. And so I thought I should put all this down in a book. So it's easier, I think, for me to hand the book to somebody and say, here, read this, or listen to it on Audible, than it is for me to try to explain it verbally all the time.
Yeah, I've only got through probably the first half so far, but I loved even the beginning about the communication. I was a huge fan of neuro-linguistic programming and how to talk to people and everything. And Bandler and Grinder, I was like huge fans. I've read all of their books, right?
Cool.
And I think it's such a great communication tool. I mean, to this day, I kind of decide if people are lying to me or not by kind of reading those nonverbal cues. And I think great communication tool. It's got to help a lot kind of get what you're trying to say out to your actors and to your fellow people you're trying to get. How does that affect your communication?
Absolutely 110%. So when I had a partner for 12 years who betrayed me, stole all my money, and left, which is what sparked the story of what this film was. Okay. Excuse me. But in that following year, I didn't put this in the movie when I adapted it into the script, but during that next year, I actually, my father had been trained by Leslie Cameron Bandler in the 80s. So I was raised with this mindset and outlook on life without even knowing it. So I went to Connie Ray Andreas. Steve Andreas had stopped, teaching years ago, but I started going to see Connie Ray, and I went to Core Transformation and Coming to Wholeness, and it changed my life. And then I went to the NLP practitioners training, and I was primarily doing it for self-help. But what I realized when I learned this as a tool and, a process, that it informed how to direct a movie, how to communicate with people in your daily life. Like it was it changed everything for me.
I agree 100%. I mean, I was the same. I listed I know all those people you're speaking of. And it's got such a bad, I hate the title neuro-linguistic programming. It freaks
Yeah.
everybody out, right? But it is just so much modeling and connecting with people in a different level or a deeper level in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I just thought that it had to be an amazing way to kind of react with your fellow actors, with your fellow producer when you're trying to pitch to a producer or something. I
Yes.
can imagine that's got to help the pitch process a lot, as you can kind of model with them. It's got to be an amazing set of tools to work with.
Completely. I mean, it's changed everything. And especially knowing, that there are three primary ways that somebody takes in information, whether they're visual, auditory, or kinesthetically. So I always tell people, especially if they're going to go to a pitch meeting, no matter what business, have something for them to hold. They'll be hearing you talk, and then make sure it looks really good. So, it's hard to identify how people process information just right off the go.
Right.
But if you've got all those elements represented, then each person is getting some part of their language represented, which I think is so important.
Ah, so well said. I love that. So, well, you've built this kind of reputation as creating films and just challenging the norm. I like that. Talk about, especially for Love Venezia, how does that kind of fit within your body of work? How did this film fit with everything else you've done?
Well, it's my first gay movie. So, I've had queer characters in certain stories before, but I've never told my story. And it's an adaptation of my story, sure, but it's the first time that I've gone closest to home in anything that I've done. And in that aspect, it sets it apart from everything else. And the other one, it's the first time as a creator that I understood how to use the tools in my toolbox. And it just felt right every step of the way. Every day we would wake up in Venice, and the weather and the atmosphere and the people and the time and the place, and it just was effortless. It was amazing.
Well, locations have such a charm in and of themselves. And since this is a little autobiographical as far as story goes, it's got to kind of envelop you in those feelings too. You associate these feelings with it. That kind of had to help. Was that ever a hindrance to you, getting lost in those memories? Was it a help more than anything else?
Well, it was surreal, because it was incredibly meta. It was walking the same steps that I walked, but here I am capturing somebody else walking them, playing a part. It was just, it was intense. But one thing that was certain was it was incredibly emotional. And, out of pure instinct, I knew when we were doing one of these scenes that I needed to have him turn left. And when I turned left, I realized that's the walk I did 100 times. And I just started crying. It just hit me in such a way that I couldn't not weep for a little bit, Wow. And they were also, the actors were so incredible that we were all sobbing. It's like behind the camera, the DP, me, the sound guy, the co-producer, we're all just sitting there crying our eyes out, trying to be as quiet as possible to not ruin their performances. It was pretty exciting.
I bet. Well, give everyone a little bit of background on what the film's about. People haven't seen it yet. It has been playing in the film circuit now for a while, but let everyone know kind of the basic plot of the story.
Well, it's based on a true story, and I'm going to tell you the adaptation as the film, as opposed to my version of what happened to me. So it begins with this guy named Michael, and he's out of an abusive relationship, and his wealthy mother has, decided she's going to send him to Venice, Italy for a month. And he's a little reluctant to go at first, but, he figures out, yeah, hell yes, I'm going to go to Venice for a month. And two of his good friends go with him. And while he's there, he meets a guy on a hookup app, and they have coffee, and he's really cool. And he offers to show the friends around. And soon enough, it turns into this ongoing dating is what I would call it. Although on one hand, part of the buildup to it is understanding desire is something that if you have it right away, it's not going to taste as good as if you wait a minute for it.
Right.
And so at one point, Michael confronts him and tells him that he doesn't live there and that he's going to leave the country and they better get the show on the road. And boy, do they.
Exactly. Yes. Very, very sensual for sure. I mean, your films always have kind of a very distinctive visual style. I think I've kind of looked at different pieces of them. Talk about your aesthetic choices in this film and how did they help you tell the story at all?
Well, one of the things that I really wanted to do was keep the look of how it feels to be outside of Venice versus inside of Venice. So the first act of the movie is pretty standard looking. I mean, it's pretty, it's beautiful, don't get me wrong. Right. But once you're in Venice, I wanted it to have this sort of glow, this kind of beautiful, magical, almost fantastical element to it, which gives the character Marco, the lover in Italy, almost a dreamlike quality. And I wanted this movie to have that. I did similar cinematography with my film El Gonzo, which has a sort of very dreamy quality to it. And it was sort of on that same sort of tone that I wanted to create for this one.
Nice. And I mean, having been there in your personal life, but now filming it for this story, it's such a visually iconic location. Did you find any hidden gems that you didn't know the first time you were there, or any place that you just had to revisit from being there in the past?
Well, the first time I went was 2014 or 15, and things had changed since then. I also had been back a couple of times between then and now when we were filming. And there was always something new to discover. There was this great kebab place that I had never noticed before, and it was so good. We went back and ate lunch there like 5 times. But nice. A lot of the same. It's a very small place. I think it's maybe 4 miles in diameter. Okay. And you can walk from one end of Venice clear to the other in about 25 minutes, and it's very tiny. So you walk the same paths every day. And now the zigzag and the alleyways and the streets and along the canals is right. Jagged enough that you could easily go down a new one for the first time. But we primarily, walk down the same steps every day. Okay. But yes, there were wonderful things to discover and things that had been there for eons that are still there. And it was really great. Nice.
Well, let's get into the casting a little bit. How did you approach the casting for this? Were there specific qualities you were looking for? Or, I mean, Daniel Bateman ends up being the star of this film, brings a lot to it. Was he had the qualities you were looking for? Or did he bring qualities that kind of set you off and said, this is what I'm looking for right now?
A combination of a bunch of different things. My casting director would not stop pushing his audition and stuff in front of me. Like every week she'd be like, no, this is the one. This is the one. And meanwhile, I'm, looking at all these different people, and none of them were quite right. And I the first thing I wanted to do was I wanted them to look normal. I wanted Marco and Michael to look like guys that look like they exist. I didn't want them to look like Fabio and, some West Hollywood, whatever. Right. I wanted them to look real in a sense. Not that the other guys don't look real, but like just average humans. Exactly. And that's hard to find these days, oddly enough. And, but the second I actually learned that Daniel grew up in Kansas City, it clicked to me and I said, oh, I don't have to tell you a thing about what that's like growing up. So I knew that innately he had it in him. And I knew that he was a completely great actor, having been on Broadway. So, there was no question for me that there were the chops. There was only the small question of, can a Broadway actor bring it down so close to just having it be in the eyes as right. opposed to projecting, to the theater room. And right. he does that amazingly well. So once I found those two, there was no question. In fact, when I first saw Alex's audition for Marco, I wept because it was so perfect. And I just kind of sat on it because I didn't know for sure. And then flash forward to a month or so later, and it just clicked that he had to do it. He had to be the guy. And then once those two were locked in, it pretty much just flew together. It seems like a matter of days, and then we were suddenly filming. It wasn't exactly, but
Right.
it felt like it.
Well, and it was such a great core of supporting characters. I mean, Mink Stoll has probably never looked better in a role in her life. I mean, she looked amazing. I mean, she plays these character things, so she's often looking frumpy and stuff, but she looked drop dead gorgeous in this film. I thought it was amazing. So,
I love it when she does dramatic acting because she's so good, and I don't think she
yes.
gets the chance all that often.
No, exactly. She did a great job with it, and I listened to her interview on your podcast, and just her story. I mean, I've known little bits and pieces of her story, but you brought out such great conversation with her. I thought it was amazing. And then the two best friends. I mean, you have kind of like Daniel's conscience and the young lady, and you have the comic relief and the guy that was great. He was hilarious. But talk about finding this well-rounded cast. I mean, how many tapes were you seeing, and how did your process go? Did you do any live screen testing or anything, or do any character or whatchamacallit?
Well, they were all self tapes.
Okay.
And except for Susanna, who played Liza, and she had auditioned for a previous project of mine a few years ago, and it was funny because she was better and more attractive than the other females in that project. So I said, I can't cast you because it won't work because, you're too good. And so for this movie right away, I knew I wanted her in it. So I just called her up and I was like, do you want to do a movie in Venice? And she was like, are you kidding me? So that was that. And then Zaramak Bachuk, who plays Dave, he and I share the same exact birthday. And
wow.
We have so much in common, and he's not a neurotic, hilarious guy. I mean, he's hilarious, but he's not like Dave in real life. We have great philosophical conversations, every time we hang out. And part of it also, even though I knew that they were all great actors, it's really important, especially if you're going to a place outside of your own country and you're going on location, and if you're a small group, that everyone gets along. And, at the end of the day, there's nothing better than to, sit around a big dining room table with your cast and crew and also be friends,
Yeah.
It was pretty great.
Well, that's my next question too. I mean, what was there anything surprising or unexpected that happened? Because I'm sure a lot of these people have not been to Venice. They may have, but I'm guessing this is kind of a first-time experience for everyone bonding together. Did anything unexpected or magical or just surprising happen when you all got together there?
I think, yes, every day. I mean, it was pretty magic. But like, I know Zaramak, Dave, the character of Dave, that actor, my cinematographer, me, I think we're the only ones who had been to Venice, and everybody else was their first time. And so that was kind of exciting just for people to experience it, because the city is so unreal, and it's like a fantasy land. It's like you're going into, Disneyland, but it's not fake. It's real. It's really this,
Right.
And they really use boats, not cars. They, all these things. And so on that regard, it's amazing to see people see that for the first time, and also really comforting to know it as well as I have anyway. I think I'd probably spent the most time there out of everyone, which was helpful because I knew where we were shooting, and the film commission and the police were really super helpful. And I delivered them, our master plan and shooting schedule, so they would know every 15 minutes where we would be at all times. And they pretty much just let us have the run of the place, which was great.
That's amazing. I love that. Well, and you've often spoke about the importance of creative freedom in your works and everything. How did that manifest in this film? Were there any moments where you felt like you guys took maybe a creative risk, or just one of the actors or something brought something you weren't expecting?
Oh, I always let the actors, here's how I approach a scene. Excuse me. Take one, we'll do it as it's written.
Okay.
Take two, we'll mix it up. We'll sort of do a little improv, or something like that. I'll say, put the script away and show me, or let's do it as it's written, but how would you like to do it? I just let them do it. And then a third possibility is, all right, let's put the script completely aside. We know what scene comes before this and what scene comes after it. So if the scene beforehand is A and the scene after it is C, B can be anything at all. So let's play around and shoot as many possibilities for B as we can. And sometimes it works. Sometimes you get some little magical moments. Sometimes it doesn't work so well. But typically there's always something you can use in the editing room that helps inform the scene in a way that you never suspected it would.
That's such a great way for the actors too. I think that gives them a lot of, I think it gets people really kind of their juices flowing. And that's what they became actors for in the first place, is to create these characters. And it's nice to perform the written word, but to actually do part of the creation. That's got to be exciting for them as well, I can imagine.
It seems to be.
Nice. It's like I said, it's been playing the film festival circuit now for over a year. Talk about the audience's reaction. What's kind of excited you? Was there any feedback you got you weren't expecting? Any feedback you were particularly proud of?
One thing that I really love witnessing is it's so fascinating to me because people, like, I'll do an observation of who's getting ready to watch this movie, the people going into the theater.
Right.
And I see how they behave towards each other and within internal groups. And then I see how that changes when they walk out. And some of them are sobbing. Some of them they're just overwhelmed with joy sometimes. But what's interesting is to experience and witness how they interact differently afterwards. It's like they're treating each other with a different kind of kindness than they were going in. And I love it. It's inspiring I hope that's a ripple effect that continues to go through our world.
And that's kind of one of the final questions. What do you hope audiences take away from the film? And what do you hope your ensemble of actors took away after working on this project together?
Well, I've heard from the actors. They were all surprised in the sense that they didn't know it was going to look and be as good as it was, even though they were there. And I always love that. It's like you're there, but you just don't never know, especially if you're in front of the camera. You don't know what the framing is or what it really looks like. The two takeaways that I think are the most important are that people learn to find love in everyone they meet, and that throughout sexuality, be conscious, be present. Conscious sex is what I call it in the film, but it's like be with the person you're with, whether it's a 2-hour fling or a 20-year love affair. It doesn't matter, but just go in with it with love and consciously. And those are the two, I guess, themes of this film.
And what stories do you have in your mind? What do you see next in your purview? I mean, now that you've had a year of the festival, now you're going to get this out there to the general public right now and streaming and video on demand and maybe a theatrical release. Where do you go next? Are you always on the net? Are you kind of the person always 2 steps ahead working on a couple scripts, or what are you after from here?
So I am a serial entrepreneur, like I mentioned before. So my new favorite thing to do is I'm working with my assistant, Ella Spencer, to take all of my original screenplays and turn them into novels. And then I'm hiring narrators to do the audiobooks for Audible. So that's all underway at this moment. And I sort of see my career as an industrial kitchen stove with like 20 different burners. And every burner has a pot on it. And some of them are boiling, some of them are simmering, some, like this one, are about to be removed, and put on plates. There are too many to count. The only genre I haven't done yet is a proper Western. And I have a script for that, and I would love to. And in this particular Western, it takes place in a region where the gender roles are reversed. So
Wow.
all the positions of power and authority are held by women, and all the prostitutes, laborers, and workers are men. And so, but it's a classic, totally classic Western. It's not campy. It's like strictly a classic Western. And I'm really excited about that one.
I love when people flip the script like that. That's amazing sounding. You have to do that.
I can't wait.
think that's great. And I love that. I have a good friend who's an actor, writer. He's doing the same thing now. He's taking a lot of his stuff that has not got sold anywhere and turning it into a book, into novel form. And I think that's
Why not?
a great way to do that, right? Yeah.
Because
we're in
it's
the world of repackaging now so many different ways anymore. So yeah.
Well, exactly. And, it takes so long to get a movie made that in the meantime, you might as well have somebody enjoying the story. And
Right.
there are book readers who aren't necessarily moviegoers. So, you might get a whole new type of audience, that are interested in your work.
And we all know our imagination always adds so much to the written word more than we see visually, and things that you didn't expect are there. And so it's always different. I love that. I think that's a great idea. Well, Steve Balderson, it's been great having you on the Left of Str8 show interviews today. Remind everyone where they can start seeing the film, how they can see it, and talk about your book too, where they can find this magnificent book of yours.
Thank you. Accessing Creativity is available anywhere books are sold, and also on Audible. And I narrate the audiobook. So that was kind of fun to do. The film Love, Venezia is, we're in talks with distribution companies right now. So I don't know how long. Sometimes it's, once you've got a deal, it could take a couple of months. Sometimes it could take more than that. Just depends on how much and what their slate looks like. But I would anticipate, it's hard to say whether it would be the end of this year or the beginning of next, but it's coming up soon where people will be able to see this. And in the meantime, the website, which is dikenga.com, Dikenga, or stevebalderson.com, will get you there also. If they go there, there's a little email sign-up sheet or a little form that, they'll become part of my list. And that's I'm going to use for once the film is released. I'm going to send one email and one email only to that list. I'm not going to do it every week like everybody does, saying, here, the movie's out, so you can see it.
Oh, fantastic. Well, it's worth the watch. I enjoyed every minute of it. Steve, you're going to have to come back on your next project. I really appreciate you, my friend.
I would love it. Thank you so much.
All right, super. Well, stay on the line for me, guys. Again, the film is called Love, Venezia. I love this film. Fantastic character of actors. I happen to know a couple of them, so maybe we'll get them on the show in the next couple of months before it actually premieres. But be on the lookout for that. This book, if you love the art of communication, if you love learning how to kind of interact with people, get the book. I'm enjoying it immensely. We'll see you next time right here on the Left of Str8 show interviews. Have a great week, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to The Left of Str8 Show. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast distributor, and please give us a 5-star rating so more listeners can find us. You can follow us on social media, and be sure to check out our website for contests and other news and information. See you next week.